What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, and you're watching TaiwanPlus. Presidential hopefuls from the two main parties here in Taiwan are trading barbs on China. The threat from Beijing shapes every national election in Taiwan, but this time there is a twist. The strongest third-party challenger in decades is also in the running. John Van Trieste has this update.
In just over a month, Taiwan will go to the polls, and with each day, the temperature rises. At this rally for Democratic Progressive Party candidate Lai Ching-te, outgoing President Tsai Ing-wen showed up, hoping to help win her party another 4 years. Lai is now doubling down on the issue that hovers over all Taiwan's elections. China claims Taiwan and says it will invade if it has to. And the past 8 years with the DPP in charge have seen things get as tense as most people can remember. Under President Tsai, the party has refused to recognize an unwritten agreement the opposition says helped keep the peace. Under this so-called 1992 consensus, named for the year it was agreed, Taiwan and China recognize themselves as part of one China, even if both sides disagree on what one China means. With that out the window, Beijing's ratcheted up its military threats and hit Taiwan with a string of trade bans. Lai argues his party has led Taiwan away from trade dependence on China, and that if his opponents win, the country will be back under Beijing's economic thumb.
我们的对手都共同喊出重启服贸，他们一个接受9·2共识，一个高喊两岸一家亲，他们都想要让台湾走回依赖中国的老路。
Lai's Kuomintang rival Ho Yo-i hit back at that at a competing rally. He says the DPP's claims it's helped wean Taiwan off its dependence on China aren't true. He cites the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, or ECFA, a KMT negotiated trade deal with China that the DPP has left intact.
民进党现在不是还在走ECFA的路吗？而且对ECFA的依赖度也没有减少啊。侯友宜没有走回头路啊。侯友宜就是继续走，让两岸经济大家都能够更好嘛。
But sparring between these two established parties isn't the only focus of attention. For the first time since 2000, Taiwan has a serious third candidate for president, the Taiwan People's Party's Ko Wen-je. Even if, as some recent polls suggest, he's headed for third place, his party could still be a force in the legislature. If things are to get done, the establishment will need his party on board, something he sees as good for the country.
这次应该是20几年来第一次有机会国会3党不过半，我也觉得这样目前整个台湾的政治灰蓝极绿这个还是要打破不然的话它永远在两极对抗的泥淖。
The KMT and Taiwan People's Party have agreed to work together to win legislative seats. In at least one district, the Kuomintang's not even running a candidate. But the two parties have had a rocky time this campaign season, failing to form a joint ticket. What it all comes down to is this. China, as ever, looms large. But Taiwan also needs to consider a question it hasn't had to in years. What happens if a two-way fight becomes a three-way deadlock? Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's new wave of one-year conscripts will start their service in just over a month. It's part of President Tsai Ing-wen's military restructuring plan, focused on more realistic training and civil defense. Jaime Ocon explains.
Rescuing people from a bus crash. This is just one of several civil defense exercises held by the military and local governments every year. It's part of the country's efforts to better prepare for emergencies like accidents, natural disasters, and war. Starting next year, Taiwan's conscripts will be focusing more on civil defense, spending up to 80 hours training to deliver emergency relief.
所以民安演习或者民安相关的训练，可以说是让这个作战跟紧急救难救灾、天灾地变，当部队要动的时候，民间要动的时候，怎么样整合一个最大的资源？
In light of China's growing aggression against Taiwan and threats to invade the country, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen announced a military restructuring plan last year. The biggest change was to mandatory military service, which was extended from 4 months to 1 year. But the reforms also include plans to increase the number of active troops, plans to deploy conscripted troops to positions that better protect infrastructure, the establishment of a civil defense system for medical and emergency relief, and plans to upgrade reservist programs to provide additional troops. Analysts say these plans are supposed to give conscripts more realistic training and focus their skills in areas where the country needs the most help.
在遭逢紧急危难的时候，不管是战争灾害或者是天然灾害，让这些受过兵役训练的国民都可以协助个人、家庭、社会乃至于国家进行各种防卫任务。
The first batch of one-year conscripts will start their training at the end of January. The hope is that these new recruits will be able to get the training needed to defend the country in any emergency. Dolphin Chen and Hamio Khan for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's Transport Ministry is updating its rules on drone licenses. One proposed change would lower the licensing age from 16 to 14. Drone enthusiasts say this will let young people use the emerging technology, which includes remote-controlled airplanes, as a hobby. They say it would also teach them about national defense, with drones playing an increasingly important part in modern militaries. The ministry is also considering extending the validity period of licenses from 2 years to 3. Turning now to international news, Israeli forces are pushing into southern Gaza. This comes after days of heavy bombardment of the enclave following the end of a week-long ceasefire. Gaza's health ministry says more than 15,000 people have been killed in the Hamas-controlled territory in the last 2 months. Israel's military launched offensives on Gaza following a cross-border attack by Hamas on October 7th, which killed 1,200 people. For more on the situation in Gaza, our reporter Rick Laurent spoke to emergency doctor Sang Kai-hong with Doctors Without Borders, also known as MSF, who recently returned to Taiwan from working in Gaza.
Since you've got back and you've been talking to media here in Taiwan, you've called for a ceasefire. There was a pause, a truce between Israel and Gaza, and that's now collapsed. Can you tell us why you were calling for a ceasefire?
From the perspective as a doctor or from the perspective of a medical humanitarian organization, it's nonsense that we stay in the hospital and we tried our best to save 1 or 5 or 10 lives, to do our best to save them. But at the same time, the war is still happening and hundreds of thousands of people are still dying. I think it's unacceptable and it's nonsense for a doctor. So I think the ceasefire is essential.
And one thing we've been hearing from reports of Gaza is the Israeli attacks on hospitals. Can you tell us what you know about these?
Since the start of the war, according to the statistics of WHO, it's over 100 accidents of attacking the medical facility. MSF, we have our own medical facility in a hospital called Al-Auda. It's in north part of Gaza. This place was also attacked, and 4 of our staff are died from this accident. Even before the attack, they are doing the operation, they are treating the patients inside of the hospital. So I have no any idea, and I cannot think of any reason why this place, the international neutral organization, independently operated medical facility would be targeted. And I think this should be further investigated.
Can you tell us a bit about what you saw in terms of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, in terms of their medical needs? What sort of situations were you seeing from the people there?
Even only the first or the second week of the outbreak of the war, there's almost no any medications. We need to suture the patient without any local anesthesias because we run out of the medication. So we have 2 children. They are older sisters and younger brothers. Their house was bombed, so all of the other families are died, and they are no more than 10-year-old, and both of them need amputation because the injury of the limbs. But we run out of the local anesthesias, so we have to do the operation for both of them. And the older sister, she has to hold his younger brothers. I mean, it's this kind of suffering or pain, it's unnecessary for us. We can do more to prevent this kind of tragedy.
That was emergency doctor with MSF Sang Kai-hong speaking to our reporter Rick Laurent. The U.S. state of Arizona has received a once-in-a-generation windfall of federal funding to make homegrown chips. And big-time foreign investors have begun pouring in billions most notably Taiwanese chip giant TSMC. Our reporter Joyce Zun traveled to Phoenix to check in on progress there.
Landing in the Arizona desert. That's what many tech companies have decided to do. A huge slice of nearly $200 billion to grow the American semiconductor industry has ended up here in the southwestern Grand Canyon state. That sum is largely accounted for by world-leading Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC, which has put in one of the biggest foreign investments the U.S. has ever seen. Also here, the world's second largest chipmaker, the U.S.'s own Intel, which is adding 2 new factories despite industry concerns of shortages in resources like water and talent.
The momentum has shifted, and we are doing everything remotely possible to continue producing in the U.S. as we've done for 50 years, and we don't believe there are going to be any barriers to production in the American markets.
Chips power all modern electronics, from kitchen appliances to defense systems. That's why U.S. President Joe Biden's been pushing to make more advanced chips in America to secure an economic and technological lead over fellow superpower China. Most of the world's cutting-edge chips are currently made in Taiwan, the self-ruled nation Beijing claims as its own and has threatened to take by force. It's a flashpoint that could disrupt the global chip supply chain, and why some companies are physically moving to set up shop near key customers like TSMC and Intel to keep their businesses resilient.
If there's geopolitical tensions, if there's challenges with the shipping channels, getting from Asia to here, being local, that's a risk that you can eliminate. Being close is the best way to reduce some of those business continuity risks.
For Germany-owned chips equipment supplier EMD Electronics, mitigating that risk means a new $39 million plant near the state's capital, Phoenix, close to big players like TSMC and Intel. It's also an area others in the industry have scouted out for its promising workforce. With just a little over 1.6 million people, Phoenix is the 5th most populous city in the United States. And that number is expected to rise as officials are bidding to make this a national hub for technologies from semiconductors to electric vehicles and energy storages that are future-proof. Arizona's labor force is strong and has a lot of potential to grow, says Greater Phoenix Area Economic Council head Chris Camacho. Speaking on whether the desert state is the best place for the water-intensive chips industry, Camacho said water planning has been a state priority for decades. Now there's a chance to redirect this resource from traditional industries like agriculture towards fields that can elevate the state.
When I talk to global media about the use of water for semiconductors versus agriculture, we're going to bet all day long on investing in semiconductor plants because they create high-quality jobs. They naturally create a lot of innovation, but also a lot of tax revenue for our communities. This is going to be the next hub of major technology convergence in the entire United States. Is going to happen here, in large part because TSMC's here.
Many are eager to see the unmatched chipmaker's Phoenix project come to life. It's already delayed by a year, but it remains a driving force behind Arizona's bid to lead future trends. To get there, the state is working to pull in firms across high-tech fields beyond TSMC to unlock advanced innovation in this vast, promising desert land. Justin Wu and Joyce Zhen in Phoenix, Arizona for TaiwanPlus.
For a closer look at TSMC in Arizona, tune in tomorrow as Joyce reports from the high-stakes Phoenix construction site. Now sports. Taiwan beat South Korea 4-0 in the first game of the 30th Asian Baseball Championships. Taiwan's starting pitcher, Shi Rongxi, held South Korea scoreless through 7 innings and logged 10 strikeouts. Meanwhile, Team Taiwan's batters combined for 10 hits, scoring 4 runs in the 3rd and 4th innings. The competition kicked off on Sunday at the newly opened Taipei Dome. Thanks for joining us today here on What's Up Taiwan. I'm Eric Gao, and we'll see you next time.